Hey out there, rock and rollers. Welcome to episode number 135 of the Ugly American Werewolf in London Rock podcast, brought to you by me, your host, the Wolf MacB, and I will be joined, as always, by my partner in crime and co-host, Gary Action Jackson from the East Coast of the United States of America. And listeners of the show probably know that I've been trying my best to move back to the U.S. after 4 years in Europe. Great time in London, living just down the street from Abbey Road Studios. Great time in Amsterdam, and I got to see some great shows and make some great connections over there. Trying my best to transition back to the USA here. It's had its ups and downs, and, well, sometimes I haven't always been in the best place to record, so I appreciate you hanging with us and giving us a little leeway here. Sometimes the sound's not always right. Now that I'm moving into a new home, I'm hoping to get that sound locked down so it always sounds good for you, because we want to bring you the rock and roll stories that we love, the concerts we review, the classic albums, the great guests that we have on, the dichotomy of who makes it in the US versus the UK and vice versa, all the stories that we've shared over the years. We want to continue to bring it to you, bring them as high quality as possible. And this week we're talking about a legend in rock and roll, in Robert Plant. Now, Robert Plant is, of course, best known for his work with Led Zeppelin throughout the late 60s, and through the 70s, and into the early 80s. But, of course, after the death of John Bonham, Led Zeppelin broke up. And though there was a couple of one-offs here and there, they never really put it back together. And in fact, after the end of Led Zeppelin, Robert Plant himself was reticent about continuing on as an artist. He was going to get a job. He had enough money. He was just going to do something 9 to 5 and live a little quiet life. It was actually Phil Collins, of all people, who encouraged him, no, look, you've still got talent, you've still got a long runway here, why don't you get back out there? And Phil was instrumental in helping him put out his first solo album, Pictures at 11, which we aptly reviewed on episode number 105. Jackson and I had a good time going over that record. So when it turned out that his second album, Principle of Moments, was about to turn 40, it was released July 11th of 1983, but, well, that'd be a nice follow-up to do. Give me a little bit, what's the difference between the first one and the second one? And Robert wanted to keep his band together, so it is the same folks making this new record. And you can definitely see some growth here, and bigger hits. Big Log was a big hit in America, really on both sides of the pond, and it's thanks to a really cool video that they made with him out in the desert. But In the Mood was a big hit for him as well, and one that he still does occasionally. He's on tour with Alison Krauss this spring and summer, and he's been working that in a little bit, which is pretty cool. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and do a review of Robert Plant's Principle of Moments. But first, we got to do a little business. As usual, we love to mention the fact that we are proud members of the Pantheon Podcast Network, a network of about 100 different music-related shows. Really something out there for everybody. And you can check them out, pantheonpodcast.com, to check out all the different shows out there. And they've been a big help to us getting good guests, like last week's guest, Mick Wall, legendary rock writer Mick Wall, talking about his book on the Eagles, Life in the Fast Lane. And we also have to thank our sponsors, rarevinyl.com. I know that a lot of you are record collectors out there, and you're always looking for stuff in mint condition or stuff that's hard to find, stuff from different countries that you don't find in your local record shop. Go to rarevinyl.com. They have over 250,000 items in stock and a 5-star rating from Trustpilot, and they ship all over the world. Use the code UGLY, UGLY, plug it in there when you check out, and you can save 10% off your orders. For some of you, that's going to cover your shipping. So I don't care if you're in Mozambique or Montana. You can go to rarevinyl.com. You can find something that you love, some treasure you've been looking for a long time. Use the code UGLY and save yourself 10%. They got a great team. You're looking for Led Zeppelin stuff, they got a ton of it. You're looking for Robert Plant stuff, you can find it. But whatever you're looking for, go to rarevinyl.com, use the code UGLY, and save yourself 10%. Now back to Robert Plant. These songs came out when we were kids. We were about 10 years old when this came out. No real clue of who Robert Plant really was in the stature of rock gods, but we would figure that out later, because in high school, he was putting out Now and Zen and Manic Nirvana, and we saw them on Live Aid, right? We saw them at Nebworth. We saw them on the Atlantic Records anniversary show. Always wondering, God, is Led Zeppelin going to ever get back together? Now, Jimmy Page and Robert Plant got back together, and Jackson and I did have the privilege of seeing that show together in Orlando. It was really important for us when they finally did that we got to see that. But the reason that could happen is because Robert Plant was keeping himself in shape. He wasn't just sitting on his laurels. He didn't retire like he first thought he was going to. He went out there and worked. And his first 3 solo albums with the same band were solid. And they set him up for great solo success, really, for the next several decades. So if you're a fan of Led Zeppelin, you'll probably like this. If you're a fan of Robert Plant, you're going to love it. But if you're just a fan of early 80s MTV, I think you'll like this one. This is a fun one. We're doing Robert Plant's Principle of Moments as it turns 40 right here on The Wolf. So it wasn't that long ago that we did Pictures at 11 by Robert Plant, his debut solo album. And although we liked it, I mean, it kind of lacked huge hits that we listened to a ton on the radio and saw on MTV a lot. But his second album did have some big hits.
Yeah, two of the big ones. And then there was a third one that I had never heard before. Apparently he released it, or it was released in Japan. But I do remember the two big ones on this one were pretty much in a heavy rotation when we were in college.
In college?
I mean, like that's what we listened to a lot. They came up in the playlist a lot.
Right. Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, as far as I can recall, in 1983, seeing, it was the Big Log video.
Okay.
Which I think was directed by Storm Thorgerson of Hipgnosis fame. That was the first time I'd ever seen Robert Plant. I mean, as a 10-year-old in 1983, I didn't know who Led Zeppelin were. I don't even think I even really knew any of their songs. I was still a little kid, basically. Listened to pop music, listened to Michael Jackson and Duran Duran and Men at Work. And the Police were starting to come into my purview, but I didn't know who Led Zeppelin were. So when I saw Big Log, as far as I know, all right, well, this is a dude. All right, his name's Robert Plant. Fine, he's got a cool song here. I like this. But I had no understanding of who he was or who he used to be or what was going on with it.
Now, I think I remember this because it was kind of a big deal, like on MTV. Like I remember they hyped it up. They had commercials saying that they were going to debut this, and I remember it had a title card too. It was one of the.
It did.
Yeah, it was almost like a little mini movie. Like it told you, it was Robert Plant, Big Log, and it had the same font as on the record. And I think I remember I had a friend who had an older brother who was like, he was out of his mind. He was like, I can't, this is going to be great. Robert Plant's new, and I was in the same boat you were. I'm like, Robert who with what?
Exactly.
Okay. Well, he was in this band Led Zeppelin from this, big in the 70s. And to me, in 1983, the 70s were 100 years ago.
Right.
All right, cool. Thanks, Pops, whatever you say.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I remember but the weird part was like, this was not, from what I understood Led Zeppelin to be, this was not that. Like, this doesn't sound anything like I thought it would.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Robert really wanted to distance himself from his Led Zeppelin past. In fact, like we said on our previous Robert Plant show on Pictures at 11, Robert was kind of content to maybe be done. Be done with rock and roll, be done with performing. Like, I'm just going to go get a job and I don't need, Led Zeppelin's over and I don't need to try to compete with what I used to be. And it was actually Phil Collins who kind of pushed him like, no, come on, you still got stuff to do. You're a young man. I mean, he was barely 30 years old, so it's like, you can't just stop. So he kind of pushed him out there. He helped him do Pictures at 11 and he helped him do this record as well. Not only did he play drums on 5 of the 8 songs, but he also did his North American tour with him in his band, and that was significant because they didn't really tour on Pictures at 11 because he did not want to play any of his Led Zeppelin catalog. He wanted to be totally separate. He didn't want to hear the shouts, play Stairway or whatever it was. He hated that anyway. And he didn't want to be subjected to that. So he's like, I'm not going to tour until I've got, an hour and a half or whatever, a headliner's catalog worth of songs to do. So the fact that he kind of waited till the second album to go on tour, and he came to America and then he went to Europe, I think later in 1983, it just shows you, look, I'm distancing myself from this whole Led Zeppelin thing. You're not getting me stuck in this trap of having to do my old songs. It's totally new band. And it is very different sound.
Yeah, and I wonder, too, when people showed up for those shows in 83, did they know that? Or were they thinking, well, we'll play a couple of the new ones and then we'll hit the back catalog? Or did they walk out of there saying, I'm a little disappointed now?
I bet there was a lot of that, to be honest with you. Because there is no internet. There is no, I know exactly what he's going to play.
Right.
They didn't talk about that necessarily in Rolling Stone. And then even if they did, not everybody reads that. It's not like it's common knowledge. Like, it was like, oh, we're going to go see him play. He'll probably play half Zeppelin and half new stuff.
Yeah.
So I bet there were some disappointed fans like, okay, this is a good one, but when are you going to play a Whole Lot of Love or something like that?
And then Thank You, Good Night.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay.
Now, I admire him for not doing that. I admire him for not playing his old stuff. And I think it was not until really he got to Now and Zen that he really started saying, you know what, I can work some of these in and maybe even rework some of them. I don't have to pretend I was never in Led Zeppelin,
And I think on Now and Zen, he even had Jimmy Page on a track or two. So yeah, definitely embracing it at that point in time. But I mean, you're right. I mean, he could have gone out there. I mean, he could have done an entire tour with him and a band and just done Zeppelin catalog stuff, made $1 zillion and gone on from there, but he didn't. So you're right that I know he probably got a lot of backlash for that, but that is pretty cool to stick to your guns and say, no, I'm not playing those songs anymore.
And he stuck to those guns forever. I mean, allegedly after the big celebration day at the O2, there was supposed to be a Led Zeppelin reunion tour. I mean, they had 9 figures on the table. They had people saying, you will make all this money. There were rehearsals. The other 3 guys, Jason Bonham, Jimmy Page, John Paul Jones, were all pretty well ready to go. And then Robert's like, no, I don't want to be a jukebox, which is a little jaded, I'm like, well, when you do your solo stuff, you're a jukebox. It's just you're a jukebox for lesser known songs.
Well, and plus when they did the unleaded no quarter deal, I mean, those were Zeppelin songs. They just reworked them. I mean, I don't think there was any. If you want to change them up a little bit, I don't think anyone would be that disappointed as long as they can hear the songs.
Well, that's right. Yeah. And I saw him play with Patty Griffin, and, they do a couple of Zeppelin songs, but they change them up a little bit, and that's okay. But at this point now, and I know right now he's touring with Alison Krauss. By the way, the tickets for that were like insane.
Huh. Okay.
Well, secondhand tickets, right? I mean, I'm sure if I had gotten on the day it went on sale, they would have been a little expensive, but you have to expect that for a legend like Robert Plant and honestly, Alison Krauss. I mean, if your name's not Quincy Jones or Beyonce, you don't have more Grammys than Alison Krauss in like bluegrass and country. She literally has something like 30 Grammys or something sick like that. So they're pretty big stars. But then like the resale ones were in, like to sit in the upper deck, somebody wanted 300 a piece. I'm like, no, I've seen Alison Krauss and Robert Plant before. It's not worth that to me. But that's been kind of his thing. I don't want to just trade on my past. I want to move forward. And he's made a lot of solo. I mean, he's made more solo albums than he ever made albums with Led Zeppelin. And Big Log was my introduction to Robert as a solo artist. Now, I never picked up any of his solo records like when we were growing up or when we were in high school or anything like that. But a few years back, he did make a box set of all his solo stuff, and I don't think it had Band of Joy. It didn't have the Alison Krauss in it. It may not have had the Fabulous Shapeshifters in it, but everything was just Robert Plant. He put into a box set called 9 Lives, and he remastered all of them in like 2007. So not only would they sound better, but they came with bonus tracks, a lot of live cuts, and some B-sides and just some unreleased stuff like that. And what was fantastic about it for me was, and it was relatively inexpensive because I went on Amazon to get it. It was fairly cheap. I mean, considering you get like 10 CDs, I don't know if it was $70. It may have been like 60 or even less than that. But yeah, it may have been like $50. But not only do you get all those discs and the book and all that kind of stuff, but it was also one of those auto rips so that all the tunes automatically you can download straight into your like phone.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, I got to wait 2 days to have it delivered, but I can start listening to songs on my Echo or on my phone right away. And that's when I really started to go through these things with a fine-tooth comb. Be like, not every song he did as a solo artist was amazing, but especially these first 3 albums, Pictures Out of Living, Principle of Moments, Shaken and Stirred, he had the same band. And that was his goal. Like, let's put together a band. Let's develop a sound. I'm not going to just be a solo artist. I'm going to have this band and we're going to develop these songs together. They really did create a sound, and it's a little bit of a time, but I think it's really good, especially after what Led Zeppelin is. He needs to make something different from that. He did it. Right.
And I think that's the big thing on this record is he could have just done that. He could have just done a record or records that sounded just like Led Zeppelin, cashed in and gone from there. But yeah, he wanted to do something different. It is cool that he put together a band that he kept for a while. And I think that even the next couple of records, he had guys that even though these weren't the same guys, carried over from one to the other. So he enjoys that dynamic of working with other people. It's not like all music and words by Robert Plant.
Well, that's right. And on the first album, he and Robbie Blunt, his guitar player, co-wrote all the songs with occasional, chip-ins from the keyboardist or synth player Woodruff. But like on this second album, it was more collaborative. I mean, he and Robbie were co-writers on all the songs, and sometimes it was just the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes they got Paul Martinez, the bass player, to chip in on more than half the songs. Sometimes they got Woodruff to write a couple as well. And Woodruff helped write the single on the first album. And so, he definitely was a help on the big song, Big Log, as well.
Well, I was going to say that, the one interesting thing too is you were talking about Phil Collins being, I think, did he produce this? I know he produced the last one.
He didn't produce this one, but he did do drum tracks on. Big Log doesn't have a drum track. They used a programmer, for that. But of the 7 songs on which there are drums, he played them. Not to mention the bonus tracks, both the live and the studio. He played on all those as well.
Interesting that a guy who sold 100 million records on his own didn't write one song on this deal. So was that a don't worry about it, or I'm really not, I just want to be here to play the, kind of just be part of this band? I don't know.
Well, around this time he was getting pretty busy. I mean,
which is crazy, which he went on this tour, which I didn't know.
I know.
He's doing his own thing. He's doing Genesis, which were Genesis was still big back then.
Yeah.
I got a couple of months. Yeah, I'll go on tour with you. What?
I know. And it was, who was it? Is it Barry Bartholomew? I'm trying to remember what the guy's name was. Barrymore Barlow was on tracks 4 and 7.
Mm-hmm.
And he was probably most famous for being in Jethro Tull. But Robbie Blunt had been in Silverhead with the fabulous 26 Marquis DeBar,
mm-hmm.
Michael DeBar. And then he went on to work with, he did a lot of session work. After he left Robert, he did some stuff for Julian Lennon. He did some stuff with Tom Petty. He's a fine musician, but it was Little Feat's Richie Hayward. And Little Feat's a band that kind of keeps coming into our orbit once in a while, it seems like here lately. He's the one who did the European portion of the tour.
Oh, okay.
Robert, because Collins had to go back to Genesis. He's a very, very busy man.
Hi, I'm Deborah Bonham.
And I am the Irish werewolf in England, Peter Bullock.
And you're listening to The Ugly American Werewolf in London.
But let's go ahead and get into it. Let's go track by track here. The first track, Other Arms,
mm-hmm.
which is Robert and Robbie writing this one together. This one, interestingly enough, the record company wanted this to be the lead single. Robert did not. I guess it's a little too hard rock. It's not that hard rock, but for this album, it's a little bit hard rock. And he's like, no, I don't want to get pigeonholed in the hard rock thing. We're not going to release this. So they didn't. But they still started off the record with it, and it still got released. Like you said, it was released in Japan as a single.
As a single, yeah.
Yeah. And somehow it still got to number 1 on Billboard Top Tracks. Now, I never heard this song on the radio. And Top Tracks isn't the Hot 100 or whatever. And it's not main rock or whatever, mainstream rock or whatever. So I don't know how it got there. I mean, I guess some radio stations decided they're going to play it. So it's a little harder than the others, but it's nothing like Led Zeppelin.
No. This one it's probably the hardest one on this record.
Yeah.
I liked it the first time when it was Missed Again by Phil Collins. What?
Oh.
It's the same drum intro. Exactly the same.
Is it?
I listened to it probably 3 or 4 times. I'm like, Phil, I understand you can't rip yourself off, but it's the same exact that boom, but up, and then right into the song. Like it's the same Phil or whatever it is intro.
That's interesting. I wonder if they were recorded around the same time. And
I don't know. Like,
this is something I've got,
Yeah.
And whichever makes it out first, that's the one that wins.
Correct.
That's interesting. I mean, it is a good opener. It is a little harder rock on this. It was backed with Through with the Two-Step, which is on the second side of the album in Japan. Interesting enough, because it went to number 1 on Billboard Top Tracks, and it ended Every Breath You Take's 9-week run.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah, I don't ever.
There.
I mean, and maybe I wasn't listening to that style of music or that style of radio station at that time, because I don't ever remember this one, but I do remember Every Breath You Take.
Well, of course, yeah. I remember it was on the number 1 spot for 8 weeks, which was a record. It beat the Beatles or somebody like that for being up there 8 weeks. And then I remember the album, Synchronicity, was number 1 too. And then it got bumped off. I'm like, oh man, first the song goes down and the album goes down. And I remember Mom saying, that's the way records are. They come up and they come down, they come and go. It wasn't going to be on there all year. I'm like, why not? It's the greatest record ever, Synchronicity. And it's still up there as far as I'm concerned. But that's neither here nor there. Listen to episode number 9 or 10 or whatever that was we did on Synchronicity. But it's also interesting that although some things like In the Mood, it's obvious what the name of the song is based on the chorus. Just like the first album, some of these songs' titles don't really have anything to do with the story or the lyrics. And while the refrain is Lay Down Your Arms, the name of the song is Other Arms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's interesting too. But at this point in time, you knew that from the last record. I don't know some of these things don't have anything to do with anything. I don't even know where they got the titles from.
Right.
Especially as you get farther into the. Well, some of them do, but most of them do not. Yeah, and it's interesting that it's called Other Arms. They have arms Lay Down Your Arms, but there is no crossover.
Exactly. But I remember first hearing this song when I got that box set, and I was like, wow, well, this is pretty darn good here. This is interesting. So we're off and running, which runs us into song number 2, In the Mood, a very popular song in his catalog. And it was released as a single. It was the second single released off the album. And they made a video for it, which is very, very 1983, if you ask me. Mm-hmm. But I mean, do you remember this being a big hit back in the day?
I don't think so. I never saw this video back then. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've heard this song so many times now. It's kind of hard to remember, but I don't think so. I think it was Big Log, and then that was it off this one.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. It's like I certainly know this song In the Mood. They've been playing on all rock radio for decades now. I don't know if I never saw that. I'm like you. I don't recall ever seeing the video. But I feel like I did hear the song at some point, and I never put it together. Oh, that's Robert Plant, who also did Big Log or who was in Led Zeppelin. I think that came later, like when we were in high school, when they played In the Mood on the radio. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's Robert Plant solo, too. The single edit is about a minute and a half shorter than what's on the album. And the U.S. single had both, right? It had the single edit and the kind of the long-form song. UK 12-inch was back with Pledge Pin from the first record, and Horizontal Departure, which we'll talk about here in a bit. So it did pretty well in America. It did number 4, I think, on Mainstream Rock, and then 39 on Hot 100. But in the UK, it only got to 81. And it seems that over the years, Robert Plant as a solo artist has done a lot better in the US than he ever did in the UK. Now, the album didn't do badly in the UK. I mean, it went to number 7, which is higher than it went in the US. It went to number 8 in the US, but it only went gold in the UK versus platinum in the United States. And I just looked at some of his subsequent releases and subsequent singles, and it just seems like it does better on the charts. He has traditionally done better on the charts in America than he did in the UK. And look, while Led Zeppelin are big in the UK, they could not be any bigger than they are.
Yeah. And that was always an interesting theme that kind of goes through this whole show is how can you be, I mean, you're from that country. How can you be bigger here than you are over there? But there's no accounting for taste, and there's no accounting for what sticks with people in one country versus another one.
Yeah, that's right. And then In the Mood was on MTV, like our buddy Neil from Def Leppard has told us, if you're not top 40, it almost doesn't matter. And certainly no one's going to see your video because there was no MTV, and Top of the Pops is one of the rare places where you can see it, and they only go up to 40. So yeah, I always liked this one. I mean, and I don't know if I remember liking it from 83 on, or it was later in the 80s, but The synths may date it a bit, but I still love it. And you can kind of hear the band is really coming together on this.
Yeah, I like the fact that it's on this one, it's the bass that's kind of driving it, and then the guitar is just the chords. I mean, the chords are distinctive, and it goes throughout the whole track. But it's that, he just does that bump, 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 comes back in again. And you mentioned the video, and I can't tell you that I'd ever seen it before, but I watched it for this show, and yeah, it's the classic early '80s. I don't know, just throw a whole bunch of stuff in the blender and we'll figure it out. There's guys that are like breakdancing or popping and locking it. I don't think anybody who ever was proficient at that style of dance heard this track and said, this is the one I want to dance to.
I know you're right about that. And you mentioned the bass. Yeah, Paul Martinez did actually help write this one. He's a co-writer with Robert Robbie on this one. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you see the breakdancers are doing some popping and locking, and then you see the band in a barn kind of a thing, playing the song. There's no drummer about for it. And then there's a beautiful woman in a big, beautiful home waiting for a man on horseback to ride in. Okay, interesting. There's a lot of close-ups of Robert, which makes sense because they're trying to sell this solo artist or whatever. There's a thing of the guys almost doing a ZZ Top thing where they're all four of them together and they point and then they can't do it. I'm like, what was the point of that? That was just weird.
And the other thing was, like, Robert Plant is supposed to be standing, singing at the top of his lungs, and that's about it. And in this one, he's trying to give you the little dance move behind the mic. Yeah, that's not working either. Stop that.
Yeah, it's very odd, very early 80s. And I honestly never recall seeing it back in the day. But I always like this one. It did well on the charts for him. And it shows he doesn't have to scream. He doesn't have to, he can be more of a crooner and a storyteller than just some guy, screaming at the top of his lungs over thunderous drums and guitar, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I'll tell you something else, which is interesting, because until Subterranean came out, I think during the pandemic or about that time, which is a real kind of career retrospective greatest hits. The closest thing you can get to a Robert Plant greatest hits over the last 20 or 25 years was called From 66 to Timbuktu, where he had some old songs in there from when he was a kid, and then he had a good collection of his best greatest hits, we'll call them, from his solo career. And then they had B-sides and unreleased stuff and oddities and stuff like that, like on a second disc. But this song was noticeably missing from that collection. And so if you were looking for a Robert Plant greatest hits, that was really all you had, and you didn't have this one on there. And that had surprised me, because I had dated a girl who I think essentially she had it, but then she just gave it to me because she wanted it more. And she even told me In the Mood's not on there. I'm like, what do you mean? The greatest hits album doesn't have it in the mood? That doesn't make sense. She's like, listen to it. It's not on there. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess you're right. So now, of course, it's on that Subterranean, but it's a great song for him, and it's one that did well for him. So I don't know what the thinking was on that, but hey, he can do whatever he wants.
Yeah, it is interesting when you get those. I mean, I don't even know if they really make too many greatest hits anymore, but yeah, why did you include A and not B? You'd think that maybe, are you waiting for the second one and then I can put that on there? I don't know.
But good shift from the harder Other Arms to it's not quite a ballad. And look, Robbie's guitar playing really fits the song. It fits the chords that he chose for it. It's not crazy. It's a great song. It's a great early 80s song. Now, that transfers into the third song, Messing with the Meekend. Weird name, of course. Don't know what it means.
Yeah, I just gave up. Okay, well, you call it whatever. That's fine.
This is kind of a weird one. It's kind of got doom, 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 and it stops.
Yeah.
And it comes back, boom, doom, doom. And generally, I don't like songs like that. I'm like, once you start, let's just let it roll. Let's not start and stop. I'm trying to get into a groove. I want to tap my foot. So the beginning, I don't like. But, there's kind of a middle part and a bridge
Mhm.
It's very proggy and very 1983. What do you think of this one?
It's. I think you're right. This is. So now we're on to track 3. So we're off and running, and now you kind of put one in there that's
The gear
a
shifter.
little different. Yeah, that's a little different. Yeah, I agree with you. The beginning's a little janky. I don't know what he's trying to do when the words come in. It gets slower. I don't know. Like, is it? I mean, it's not reggae, but are you trying to have that feel? And then by the time you get to the middle of this, we held off as long as we could. We're going full on synth, 1983.
Exactly.
And then there is kind of a cool bass part almost at the end once you get through the synth part. But yeah, this one's a little strange.
But I still think that proggy synth part is kind of the best part of the song. I mean, look, it definitely ends better than it starts. You mentioned the cool bass part. There is some cool synths from Woodruff in there. Yeah, the beginning is odd. It's almost like it's 2 songs, or like we're starting going one way, and then we're going to take this turn and go the other. And look, this is a 38 to 39 minute album, and there's only 8 tracks on it. So the songs are a little bit longer for the most part. I mean, they're between 4:20 and 5:20 on the first side, and they're between 4:20 and 5.5 on the second side. So you can stretch out maybe a little bit longer. But this one, also co-written by Martinez, it's a little weird, but they did play it live. I go back and check their set list, and they played it, so they must have liked it. Maybe because it's experimental. I don't know.
I mean, what year are you talking about? During this tour they played?
Right. Well, they didn't have much choice. I mean, you're right. And they could play some covers. They did play a Bob Marley cover in Houston on September 20th, which is where the live bits from the remaster came from, was Houston.
I think the live bits from Pictures at 11 were from the same show.
Probably so.
Yeah.
No, they would have had to have been. There weren't too many shows. I mean, I think they may have done like a Scandinavian TV show or something like that for Pictures at 11. They didn't tour because Robert Plant refused. He didn't want to be an opening act, I don't think. And he didn't want to do his old Led Zeppelin stuff. He wanted to wait till they had enough material to do a headline show. So that's what they did. And this one is an odd one. But then you get to Reckless Love, the last song on the first side. In a way, this is also kind of odd. And Phil's not drumming. It's Barrymore. Barlow is drumming here. It's a bit of a riff to start again. It's a little bit of that start-stop, but it wasn't quite as bad as the first one. Very off-kilter beat on this one. Yeah,
it almost sounds like you're trying to be like Moroccan or Middle East or something. The one thing, though, on this one is that I do miss the difference. I mean, yes, we've got a different person playing drums, but it's not the same difference as the last record. Like when Cozy Powell was on the tracks, you could tell it was way different.
Yeah.
This kind of sounds the same. It's not bad. It's just, it's not that much of a change.
I'm with you there. It's not as big of a departure from Phil.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of odd stuff going on here. Like there's some killer bass, and there's some backing vocals, there's some guitar picking. It's kind of a mishmash. Yeah, I'm with you. I put on here Indian or Moroccan guitar sounds, and then there's big synths too. So I'm like, what is this song trying to be?
And then what's the thing at the end? Is that like... It sounds like, I mean, I'm sure it was played on the synth, but it sounds like it's supposed to sound like a squeeze box or something. It's almost like you go into a sea shanty at the end.
Yeah, it was more interesting at the end to me. And then Robert was also using the power in his voice a little bit more than he had on the previous few tracks on this record. But it's odd. I mean, if you thought Messing with the Meekin was odd, eventually once it got into the groove, it wasn't bad. It was different. But this one though, and it's Reckless Love. So is it a love song? Well, no, I wouldn't call it that.
Yeah,
it's just kind of a weird one, and it's kind of a strange way to end the first side. But there you have it. They liked it, I guess, and there you go. I don't know what else to say about that one, except
I think this one kind of grows on me a little more the more I listen to it, more than Messing with the Meekin. But it is strange. But again, he can do whatever he wants on this record. So let's just see what happens.
Hey, this is Tom and Zeus from Shout It Out Loudcast, and you are listening to the Ugly American Werewolf in London Rock podcast.
First song on the second side is Through with the Two-Step.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some wind effects and then synths. I'm like, okay, now this is very 1983. All of a sudden, it's a mellow song, and to me, it's pretty close to a standalone B-side. Now, it was a B-side on the Japanese release of Other Arms. It's not exactly a ballad, but it sounds so much like these first two or three Robert Plant albums to me.
Yeah, the synth part at the beginning really kind of it makes me laugh because I know it was in vogue at that point in time, and I think synths were a lot more accessible. You could do a lot more with them, but I mean, it sounds like a commercial for the Quasar 2500 TV, the way it was supposed, or something like that. I'm like, oh god. But I think the guitar work in it is nice. I mean, it's kind of slower, but it kind of has some power to it. To me, the keyboards in this one, kind of in the middle, almost sound like the In Through the Outdoor era.
Okay.
It doesn't sound like it, but it sounds like it could have been written at that time.
Where the rhythm is lost, through with the two-step, where the rhythm is lost. Oh, yes, loving any key. You opened up the door, now I know it's got to be.
Interesting. All right. Well, that's a take I did not have. I'm with you on there. My notes are Blunt's guitar work is good and it fits the song well.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that he did a good job on that. The big synths at the end with Robert pleading, "Baby, please don't go." I'm like, this is so 1983. Like, you heard this song, you might be able to pinpoint the month that they recorded this. It's like, this is so of the time. Now, that doesn't mean it's necessarily bad, but I think for us, because we grew up in that time and that's when MTV was exploding and that's how we were getting our music and that's how we were forming our musical palette and what we liked. We hear something like that and it's like, okay, that sounds 83, but I like it because it takes me back to a cool time in my life.
Yeah,
Whereas if you were 30 years old and you didn't live through that and you hear this now, you're like, oh God, that sounds like 1983. So you can't be nostalgic about it the way that we would.
Right.
It doesn't mean you couldn't appreciate it, but it's probably not the same for people who didn't live through that time.
Yeah, there definitely is there's notes of other nostalgia in there with that sound because it was just so everything used that at that point in time. And I think probably because, I was saying, making fun of it being a TV commercial, but I think it was cheap. That was the deal. It's like if you bought a synth, the Casio 3000 or whatever, you could do a lot with it. You didn't have to have a whole bunch of musicians in the studio if you wanted a bed for some kind of commercial or a voiceover or something like that. So yeah, everything used it at that point in time. So it does bring me back to watching Saturday morning cartoons or whatever in 1993.
Well, yeah, you don't need an organ, you don't need an electric piano, you don't need a horn section. You don't need a second guitar player. You don't need a bass. I mean, you can do all that stuff with this.
Correct.
Thing, So, yeah, you don't need a drummer. I mean, you can program all that stuff. So, yeah, I get it. But, I mean, you have to embrace the new technology. And so I give them credit for, I'm not going to just make a blues album like I did in the late 60s, early 70s. I'm going to push forward a little bit here. It's not going to be punk. It's not going to necessarily be new wave. But it's going to take a mix of everything I've done and everything that's around me to make something new and different. So,
and maybe that was part of it too. What is the hot sound right now? Well, it sounds like this. Okay, put it on the record then. I don't want this to be mistaken for anything that's older.
Exactly. So then side two, song two, Horizontal Departure, which is also a B-side. I like this one. I mean, I think Robert's voice is crystal clear on this one.
Yeah, and this was a it's to me, but I've got a note on here that originally, and I went back and I'm going to change my mind on this, but originally it sounded a lot like that, like Pledge Pin at the beginning from the last record. It reminds me of that. It doesn't really sound like it. This is not Phil again on the drums. Barrymore Barlow.
Wait a minute, this is Phil.
Is it?
Yeah, Barrymore's on the next one.
Oh, is he? Okay, then I've got the notes mixed up here then. But it does, yeah, this is more, this is one where I thought this could have been a single also.
You caught my cheek, and all the things must come to fruit now. And then you stood so proud, the apple of my eye. You said you never leave me, baby. But little girl, that's the reason why. Whoa, that's why I have to leave you all alone. Whoa, that's why you have to leave me all alone. Let's go collect our prize now.
Maybe so, because I mean, again, it starts differently than kind of what most of the song is, and so that's a trend we're kind of picking up on this record. And the build up to the solo was good. The solo isn't overpowering from Robbie. Again, he's just trying to fit the song. He's not overplaying, and that's probably why he did some work for Tom Petty, because that's Mike Campbell's thing. Mike Campbell is not flashy. He just kind of does what is needed to make the song as good as possible. It's probably why Campbell doesn't get the credit that he deserves. But that's probably why Robbie kind of fit in doing some work with Tom Petty. At the end of the day, I feel like this band is very good together. And although they sound very of the time, it just sounds like they gel together very well. And I don't know, is Horizontal Departure about dying? Is it about you're leaving to go have sex with somebody else because that you're always horizontal when you're doing that stuff? I'm not exactly sure what the lyrics were about, but I know that his delivery is crystal clear. So yeah, this is one that I think gets overlooked probably, and it's pretty good. It's an interesting one on the album.
Well, so and I was thinking about this too. So you've got Horizontal Departure and then Stranger Here Than Over There, but the big one is at the end of the record. So at this point in time, or is it kind of like, I mean, do you have people like, okay, I just want to get to the big hit. Let's skip over this one. But you're right. I think this is one too that would grow on you the more that you listen to it. And then again, yeah, what are we talking about? You know, that's why I had to leave you alone. And then, you know, so you turned around and found another fool. Is it about, relationships ending? I don't know.
Seems that way. It's like, okay, go screw him and get out from under me, get up under him if that's what you want. I'll get another one. Looks just like it. Don't worry about it. Well, but he was breaking up with Maureen at this point, was he not?
Okay. I think so, yeah.
I think so. And they probably had been broken up for a while. It was kind of becoming official. And of course, they went through quite a bit in the 70s with the death of Eric and a lot, So who knows? But, well, and you're right. I mean, they saved the big hit for the end. So they're like, okay, we'll put it at the end and then make you listen to all these others before you get to it. Because you start off with the kind of harder rocker. You go straight into the mellow hit. And then there's a couple more on that side. And then you have 3 songs on side 2 before you get to the one song that everybody, I mean, if you only bought it for one song, Big Log is the one you bought it for.
And I was trying to think too, I don't remember a record that we've done recently that had even a hit, much less the big hit, as the last track. We've talked about that before. The last track is usually some kind of like dump off where you needed another one to fill out the time. Right. But not this one.
Yeah, or it's like the 8th and 9th of the worst songs, and then the 10th track is, okay, we're going to give you something pretty good to remember us by. Yeah. But it'll be like the 7th or 8th best song. It won't be like, the best song. On Toto 4, I believe Africa was the last track, which is another one that I was very into around this time, with a huge video and was a huge hit and all that. But I also think Rosanna was the first song, which made it easy for a guy with a cassette player to play Rosanna, flip it over, play Africa, flip it over, play Rosanna, flip it over, Did that quite a bit back in the day on the old Walkman. All right, and then the 7th song, Stranger Here Than Over There, with Barrymore Barlow on the drums again. This is a weird one, if you ask me, and it's kind of experimental. I mean, I wouldn't call this a rock song.
So the notes that I have are the bass starts it off. That's nice. The bridge is good. Leave me, baby, help me get my feet back on the ground. But then the end of it kind of turns into a mess. Like there's just a whole bunch of sounds they just kind of throw together. Like it doesn't sound super cohesive.
I agree with that. Yeah, and the 4 of them, Robbie, Robert, Martinez, and Woodruff, they wrote this together as they did the previous Horizontal Departure. To me, I'm with you there. It's like, let's just see what we can do.
Yeah,
I mean, I think Robert's voice is good, but the rest of it is odd, and I can't imagine that they played this one a whole lot. It's just very strange, this one, to me. Yeah, and I've got, sometimes they would play this as a second encore. Like, so that's the last song that they would play. That's weird to me.
That's very strange. You're on your way out to the parking lot anyway.
Right, and look, they only had 16 or 17 songs and they play 15. So they're going to play a lot of them, right? They're going to play most all of them. And if your encore was Big Log and Burning Down One Side, you get anything after that, it's just a bonus.
Right.
That's the way I look at it. But anywho, yeah, when they played the Spectrum a week before they played Houston, which is what the live stuff was taken from, yeah, it goes In the Mood, Pledge Pin, Messing with the Mika, Worse in Detroit, Moonlight and Samosa, Fat Lip, Through the Two-Step, Other Arms, Horizontal Departure, Reckless Love, Slow Dancer, Like I've Never Been Gone. Break, they come back at the encore, Big Log, Burn Down One Side. You figure, okay, that's it. And then you get Stranger Here, ... then Over There. That is the official title of the song, Stranger Here, ... then Over There. And maybe that's part of, it's a strange song, so that's why they named it that, right? It's stranger over where the boys are doing all their funky stuff, and it is over here where Robert's using his amazing voice. I don't know. It's weird. I can't imagine listening to this on its own.
Yeah. I can't imagine too if like you said, it was the second encore. Like this, okay, I guess we're doing this now, but I would be interested to see sitting there in 1983 and they start into it. If you took a poll of the people, would you even know what this was? Right. Oh yeah, this was the second to last song. I remember this. Not really, because I've already skipped over it.
But it was harder to skip back then. You had to take the needle and pick it up and push it to the thing. And the technology of you can fast forward the tape and it'll come to the break. I don't know if that even existed quite yet.
Yeah, and that was a pretty big feature too to pay for.
Yeah.
When it did come out.
Yeah, I remember. I think my first tape deck of my car might have had that, but I didn't get that till like 1990.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, that took a lot. That was a little ways off. Anyway, you get past that, you get to song number 8, 4 on the second side, Big Log. I love this one. I love this song. This is the reason we're basically reviewing this album, is because of this song right here. Do you remember the video when we were kids?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And this is one of those ones, kind of like New Year's Day from U2, where it's like, is the song making me think about being alone and driving in the desert? Like the song and the video are so intertwined in my head that's all I can think about. And I remember watching that thinking like, oh, that's the coolest thing ever. You're just like cruising out in the desert and there's cool stuff that you see, and he goes to the gas station, and then he's in the church for a while, and then he's in a bar, and I don't know. I just always had an attraction to the Southwest desert in the United States.
Yeah, and
it could have been from this video. I don't even know.
Yeah, maybe that's what put it in there way back in the day. Who knows? And the video has like an extra minute of video. Like the video is more than 6 minutes long. The song's only about 5 minutes. And I'm fairly certain there may have even been an edit to make it a little shorter single version.
Yeah.
You're right. He's kind of in no man's land there, like you find between California on your way to Vegas, something like that. Nothing out there. His car is overheating. He comes to a desert gas station.
And the song doesn't even start playing until he's out of the car. So like the drive in, I think like it's like wind blowing or something. He pulls in, he gets out, he kind of walks around, and then the song starts. Right.
Yeah. Exactly. He pulls up the hood.
Yeah.
There's smoke and steam coming all out of it. He's like, and then which is iconic song. And there's nobody there. There's no one there to help him. There's maybe a stray dog around, but it was interesting. He goes to a refrigerator outside. He goes out and pulls out a Coke or something. He gets drinking. I'm like, oh, there's no one there, but there's a fully stocked fridge. That makes sense. And then they show a place that looks like maybe a motel or something like that, although it's fancier than just a motel. At least the architecture is. It shows a girl kind of being pushed around by an old dude. Like, here's a pretty girl dressed, kind of being pushed around. And then Robert is in this little room in there, and he's ripping up a photo. We didn't really see who the photo was. We assume it was probably a woman. Again, maybe this is part of his breakup with Maureen. I don't know. But there's some woman being pushed into another room, and then we don't really see her. Then he's in a bar where there's an old fat dude having a beer. There's a woman behind the counter, like a bartendress. And then he's got that thing with string, that he's putting between his fingers, like, okay, put your hand in there, right?
Yeah.
It's one of those things you used to do as a kid. It's like, okay, why is he doing that? That doesn't make any sense. And then he's in a hotel where he's swimming in a very European swimsuit.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then there's someone kind of knocking on the glass, like there's someone underground who can see him swimming there knocking on the glass. And then it turns out he just passed out in his car. And there's someone knocking on his window like, hey, I'm the tow truck. It's time to go kind of thing. But it's kind of cool because that whole line, I love his league with the freeway and the coming of nighttime. That line happens and it is sunset in the desert and he's being pulled off by the tow truck. But then very much the video, the song's fading out. The tow truck takes Robert and his car off, and then past them, here comes, a woman like a big Cadillac, and now she's overheating, like going the other direction, coming in, pulling into the same spot, and now she's got to sit there and wait. That's her story now.
Right. And so it was always like, what's going on there? Was he looking for her? Was he waiting for her? Did they just pass? Did she have anything to do with this, or is this a totally different thing? Who knows? It's a video from the 80s. Take with it what you will.
I know, but it imprinted on me. And then see him like in the church or the old schoolhouse, whatever that thing was, where he's almost singing to himself, right? He's at the front of the class and he's singing, but then he's in the back of the class giving himself a stern look as to what he's singing about. But again, big log. What's the big log? What is a big log? What part of this song is about a log? And why is it a big one and not just the regular size one? I don't know where this title comes from. It's a fantastic song with a very odd title.
Yeah. And you were talking about Robbie Blunt playing along with the song. He's perfect in this one. Giving you exactly what you need in that the riff and the bridge part of it. It's just it's fantastic. He's not flashy, not anything where it's almost like he kind of fades into the rest of the song, but then if you really listen to what he's playing, it's pretty good.
No, it is. It's fantastic. He does an amazing job here. It's iconic. And to me, I have a note here. This might be the best use of Robert's vocal range on all of his solo.
Okay.
Because yes, he has a rich croon to it, but he still gets a little.
He goes up high. The other nice thing too is it's got a drum beat to it. The 808 is used on this one, but it's not egregious. Like it's just kind of in the back holding the place. Like it doesn't sound super cheesy, which sometimes electronic drum beats, they get they get overused and they kind of sound cheesy because it's just a loop. It's the same thing over and over again, but this one's pushed back enough where it fits in nicely.
But it sounds more like clacks than it does a drum throughout most of it. There is a little bit of drumming through it, which is synthetic, but it sounds like people clapping their hands. So that's good for them. I mean, I think if you're going to use synthetic drums, don't necessarily make it sound exactly like a synth, make it sound like something else.
Yeah.
It went to number 11 in the UK. So I feel like this is about, certainly at the time, this was the biggest single he had in the UK. It went to 20 on the Hot 100 Billboard. It went to 6 on Billboard Top Tracks. I don't really know what the difference between Top Tracks and Hot 100 is.
Yeah, it seems like there's
an excuse to get more things in there.
Right. There are so many more charts that I even ever knew that existed.
That's why in the UK, it's simple. It's like, we have this one chart. Here it is. You're either on it or you're not. But it was back with Far Post in the US, which was not included on the first album. It was like a B-side or an extra track. And then Messing with the Micken in the UK. So huge one. And in fact, when I was in the UK for the first time, which I believe was the summer of 1994, I bought a double disc, like top UK hits of the 80s that had all sorts of stuff. It had rock, it had pop, it had synth, it had techno, and from a lot of different bands, it had this on. And it was one of the reasons I bought it, because I was over there. I wanted to buy stuff that you couldn't get in America. And like, okay, well, you can't buy top British hits in America. And some songs I didn't know, obviously, because some songs are hits over there that aren't hits over here.
Right.
But I'm like, no, this is one that I have to have. And I didn't own any Robert Plant. I didn't really even think about it. I mean, even like Now and Zen, as big as that one was, I think I thought about it, or even Manic Nirvana, both of those, which came out pretty close to each other. I'm like, yeah, it's got samples from Led Zeppelin. I don't think that. I was very against sampling, especially for rock acts. It's fine if you're a rapper and you can't make your own music, so you have to sample it. But I'm like, you're a musician, man. Just make new stuff. I was not a huge fan of sampling.
Yeah, I was on the fence when Now and Zen came out, when he went back and used, I think it was 2 or 3 songs from the Zeppelin catalog in Tall Cool One. But yeah, this is definitely 100% his own thing. And
it's so much better. And there's great backing vocals on this one. I think John David was doing a lot of, along with Robert, was doing backing vocals, and he worked a lot with Dave Edmunds back in the day. And it really comes through on this one. Was directed by Storm Thorgerson on location in like Palm Springs and out in the desert between LA and Vegas and stuff like that. I think it's great. And the fact that there's no drummer, but it's a really good song, I think it's killer. I think it's the best solo song he ever did. I think it's the best use of his voice on all of his stuff. And it's killer to me. I'll never forget this one.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it also kind of cemented too back in the MTV days, where it didn't have to be, you could have a whole bunch of stuff on there. It didn't have to be one thing. It didn't have to just be whoever was the hottest band on the pop charts. You could have stuff like this and have little mini movies and just kind of broaden the horizon a little bit. And I do remember it was kind of a big deal, because I'm trying to remember what came off of Pictures at 11, like Burning Down One Side. But for whatever reason, everybody was really excited about this, like the older people that I knew when it was coming out. Yeah.
And he obviously looks a little bit older. I mean, he doesn't look fresh-faced like the guys in Duran Duran or even like the Demise, at that point. He does look older, but he's still a good-looking rock star. So, like, let's play that up and let's make videos about this guy, and even if he doesn't have contact with the woman, let's put the women in these 2 videos, right? So to give some kind of sexual chemistry there. So, yeah, it kind of works, definitely. Now, they put some live stuff from Houston on there, including they did a Live in the Mood, but they did a Lively Up Yourself, a Bob Marley song, which I guess he didn't do every night of the tour because I'm not seeing it on setlist.fm. So it's cool that they threw that in there. But there was kind of a non-album track called Turnaround that Phil Collins did play on. And did you listen to this one? Did you hear this one?
Yep, I listened to it a couple times. The slide is nice.
Yeah.
On this one, I don't know why they didn't include this. I mean, it's a fully formed song.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a nice treat on the reissue.
Yeah, the guitar riffs were great. And you're like, but the slide was cool on there.
Mhm.
Now, maybe they decided, all right, there's no other slide anywhere on the album, so we're not going to use the one with the slide. But it sounds good. And I'm surprised it's not on there because it fits in with the rest and it's better than some of the experimental stuff. I mean, as a song, I understand if maybe you're an artist and you want to say something like Stranger Here Than Over There or a
Meekin.
Yeah, Meekin, you know, okay, well, these are things that we've really enjoyed putting together and it's different and it's kind of helping define our sound. Like, okay, well, you can put on whatever you want, but it's just strange that they would leave this one off there because to me, that's a pretty darn good song and great playing from Rob.
Yeah, and I don't know why they make the decisions they do, but it is nice when you hear that song that you actually like it, and it's not just like, ooh, I know why they didn't put this on the record.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the principle of Moments, you know, that went platinum in the U.S., strong from Big Log and In the Mood, you know. Then they toured the U.S. in late fall, and then I guess they went and toured Europe in even later, 83.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe they took a bit of a break and they worked on recording Shaken and Stirred next, which would not come out till 1985. And it kind of had the big hit Little by Little on it, which again, that's one that I love. I think that's a fantastic Robert Plant solo song. But then that was kind of the end, I feel like, of this band, right? Like this band, they stayed together for the first 3 albums. They did some tours together. And I don't know if they thought they took it as far as they could take it, or Robert said, okay, great, we did what I wanted to do, created a sound, kept the band together. It wasn't Led Zeppelin, but yeah, now I'm done, and now I can go work with whomever. I don't know.
Yeah, and I'd be interested to see what happened on that because you were talking about Now and Zen. That didn't come out until 88.
Right.
So he was kind of, you know, you had 83, 84, 85, or 82, 83. 85, and then you waited until 88. So I don't know whether he thought maybe he was going to take a little break and then do something different. But yeah, I think these first 3 albums that he did are probably the most cohesive.
Yeah. And that would, I think, be from having a consistent band, you know. And he
Right.
may have had a bunch of hot shots in on Now and Zen, and Jimmy did a couple of songs on Now and Zen. And, you know, maybe the record company got to him. It's like, look, you don't need a band. You just need Robert Plant. We can
Right.
put whomever behind you, you know. In the era of Phil Collins being a solo act and Tina Turner and Steve Winwood is back, you know, and he doesn't need Traffic. He doesn't need Spencer Davis. He's just
Right.
himself. Like, you don't need these people. You can just be Robert Plant. Maybe the record, he was on Esperanza, which is basically, I feel like, a glamour thing, part of Atlantic. You know what I mean?
Was that was his own thing, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah.
Because I don't remember anybody ever seeing anybody else on that record label.
Right, you know, and I'm sure Ahmet Ertegun was not going to let him go someplace else.
Right.
You know, and he continued to have hits, but Now and Zen had some big hits, and Manic Nirvana had some big hits, you know, and the albums maybe didn't sell through the charts. I mean, I think they at least went gold, but this one went platinum, you know, and it was because of the big single and a little bit of MTV, you know, Magic Fairy Dust pushing it out there. But it did open him up to a new audience, right? Like you and me, who had no idea who Led Zeppelin were. Of course, we would eventually, and then we come back and have a greater appreciation for this, like, oh, this is Robert without Led Zeppelin. And it's different, and it's very, very good.
I think so. I think he accomplished what he wanted to on this record, saying I can make a record with hits. I can sing the way that I want to and not have anybody say, oh, this is just Led Zeppelin light. Well, it probably did, but I don't subscribe to that. I think this is its own thing.
I agree. And I think that's the way Robert wanted it. And he established a solo legacy, started a very successful solo career that's been going on for more than 40 years now. And you want to call his collaboration with Alison Krauss, that's not really a solo career anymore. Okay, fine. You know, yes, he's collaborating with someone else, but he doesn't do that all the time, right? I mean, he did that for Raising Sand, and he comes back and does it again later. He finds different people to work with to find different sounds and things like that. And he's still doing it now. He does not have to do it for money. He does not need money, but he is on tour right now in the United States of America with Allison.
It's what he does. I mean,
that's his thing.
That's the thing is if he doesn't do that, what's he going to do? Sit around and I don't want to do that. I want to go. I want to play. I want to have different experiences with different musicians, different types of songs. So yeah, good for him. There is part of me that's sad that he didn't take the Zeppelin reunion because that would have been really cool to see.
Yeah.
I do have to hold him in high regard for saying, I don't want to do this. I don't need to do this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to be a jukebox, like you said. I'm doing something else.
Yeah, exactly. And as far as I can see, I'm looking at some set list stuff from he and Allison. They do a lot of covers and they do a lot of traditional songs and things like that, which they do together. But he does do a reworked Battle of Evermore, it looks like, and he does a reworked When the Levee Breaks on there too. So that's cool, but it's not the whole show.
And you're talking about with Alison Krauss?
Yeah, just last week. Yeah.
So I'm sure her voice lends very well to the high parts in that Battle for Evermore. That would be. I'd like to see that. I'll search that on the YouTubes.
Ooh, and then on some nights, interesting, because they do mix it up a little bit. Looks like he did do In the Mood on the 5th of May in Kansas City, along with Rock and Roll. Now, I bet it's not like the original Rock and Roll.
Probably
I bet it's
not.
Completely reworked
Yeah.
Rock and Roll. But also Battle of Evermore and also When the Levee Breaks. You get those 4 songs in there. Now I'm like, well, maybe I just won't take the wife. Maybe I'll just get a $300 ticket for myself. Because that's the thing nowadays, right? It's like, if I just go by myself, it costs whatever the ticket costs. If I take my 8-year-old, then I have to, take her to McDonald's or something beforehand. And then, it's double the ticket price. But if I take my wife, okay, well, now we got to get a babysitter for like 4 or 5 hours. And that's expensive. I got to take her to a nice dinner, which is way nicer than what I would just buy myself. I just get a Jimmy John sandwich or something for myself. Plus I don't drink at the show. She's going to want to drink at the show. Show drinks are expensive. For something Robert Plant and Alison Krauss, she's probably going to want some souvenir, a shirt, the record, whatever. That's always expensive. Plus I got to get 2 tickets. Suddenly a night out's costing me $1,000. It's like, well, I just go by myself. It costs me a couple hundred. That's what we're going to do from now on. Well, folks, that is our take on Robert Plant's Principle of Moments, released July 11th, 1983, celebrating its 40th right around the time of the release of this show here. And I got to tell you, it was fun to go back and listen to it. I was a huge Led Zeppelin fan as a teenager, but as a young person, like 8, 9, 10-year-old, watching MTV, I didn't know who Robert Plant was as far as his status goes as a rock god with the biggest hard rock band of all time in Led Zeppelin. I had no idea. But I did know the song Big Log thanks to MTV and In the Mood, and thought, well, he's great. And then, of course, as I got older and started to realize who Robert Plant was, I appreciated him more as a singer and a songwriter, and was happy to be able to connect him to that time when I was younger to a song that I really loved, In Big Log. And this is the foundation of his solo career, which has been very, very successful. Over a dozen albums, 40 years touring, collaborating with all sorts of different people, and not having to do the Led Zeppelin reunion. Look, I'll admit that if Led Zeppelin had done a reunion after Celebration Day, I probably would have plunked down way more money than I should have to see them many times, maybe even quit my job and follow them around, okay? But I didn't, because Robert said, no, I don't want to do that. And I respect him for it. The time has passed, okay? Maybe in the 90s when Jimmy and Robert got together, that would have been the time to do the full-on Led Zeppelin reunion. But now it's too late, as far as I'm concerned. They're just too old. It's not the same. And they don't need the money. I think Jimmy would still like to do it, but Robert doesn't want to do it, and that means it's not going to happen. And I admire him. I actually thank God for it, because he's saving me a lot of money, right? And it's not like he's not still making great music. Jimmy isn't doing as much. He's still kind of rehashing and remastering and doing all that Led Zeppelin stuff. But Robert, God bless him, he's continued to march forward. He's on tour with Alison Krauss now, and I got a feeling that his recording days are not over. So it was fun to go back and listen to Principle of Moments all the way through as it's turning 40. Remember, it's good times growing up and getting to know better. This classic album, this is really one of the ones that really has kept Robert in business all these years. So as usual, folks, we want to know, do we get something right? Do we get something wrong? Do we miss the point? Did we leave out your favorite part? You have got to let us know. You email us. It's uglyamericanwerewolf@gmail.com. Let us know the bands, the albums, the concerts, the DVDs, the books, the rock properties that you want us to talk about here on the show. We got to thank Pantheon Pods. Check out pantheonpodcast.com to learn about all the different shows on the network. And go to rarevinyl.com, guys. If you're a record collector, go to rarevinyl.com and use the code UGLY. It'll save you 10%, and they'll ship it to you anywhere around the world. Now, we've got some more fun stuff coming up on the Wolf here. We've got some fun guests coming up. We've got some fun shows that we're looking forward to reviewing and talking to you about, and some great killer albums celebrating big anniversaries in the next few months here that we can't wait to review and talk with you about on the show. By the way, we do have a Wolf shop where you can get your Wolf merch, t-shirts, mugs, stickers. You can find it on Twitter at ugly_werewolf. You can find our shop. It's on my Shopify. Go check it out. And please download, subscribe wherever you get the show. And be sure, if you're thinking about it, guys, write us a positive review. Those 5-star reviews on Apple, on Spotify, on Good Pods, wherever you listen, make a huge difference. It just helps us find more rock and rollers like you. So until next time, folks, wherever you are, all you rockers all around the world, be cool and stay safe.